and drinking in the pew, you're more than welcome to stay hydrated. It's really important. You have not come here to me, however, and I would love to introduce you to the Reverend Jimmie Hawkins. Jimmie is he's going to have to tell you what his title, and new title as of 2 weeks ago, right? But just an extraordinary human being that I've come to know since yesterday evening. He blessed us with a wonderful sermon this morning here in our congregation. If you want to go back and hear it, you can. It's on our website, pcmorristown.org. But he's got a word to share with us about what's going on in his office in Washington and in New York City. So, please join me in welcoming Reverend Jimmie Hawkins. And I'll first pray. Let's pray. Gracious and loving God, we're thankful for this day of Pentecost, when we remember and celebrate the gift of your Holy Spirit. And we ask that that gift would fill each of us in our lives, in our ministries, in the work that we do to make our world a more just, peaceful, and loving place, a place that you would have it to be. We ask that you bless Reverend Hawkins, his staff, his office, the work that he does, and in this time together, may your Spirit be in this place. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to, how many of you have heard about the Office of Public Witness? How many of you have been to it? Okay, good. How many of you heard about the Presbyterian Ministry of the United Nations? How many of you have been to it? Okay, good. I'm in the right place. All right. So I'm going to start with a little quick overview of the work.
Can I just make sure, can everyone hear? We can
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our work and then talk about some of the issues. But I really want to leave about 25 minutes to engage one another, because that's really where we really find ways in which we can engage. So I'm going to talk again about the work that we are doing.
Pocket.
It's obviously a lot of...
I'm not going to the bathroom.
You know those stories. Okay, go on.
Okay, very good. So, again, as Daniel shared, I'm your advocacy director for the denominations. We deal with all of your advocacy work. We've been in existence, both offices, for over 70 years. We're located in D.C. and in New York. So this is our staff. And one of the things I do, I want to leave a couple of PSAs with you. One, that we are a resource for you. As members of the church, that if you need us, please let us know, especially if something's going on in your community that you want us to be attentive to. Because we do have a national platform, and we can write out information to the entire denomination, or we can do, and we don't get picked up by a lot of the national media, this country, Washington Post, CNN. They don't really carry what any of the churches do. They will carry what Reverend Barber does every now and then. They'll carry what Frankie and Graham, if he says something crazy, if he says something, things along that line. So most of our communications, we send out national communications all within the church network. But also, if you want to know about our work, we don't do local work, we don't do state work, we only do national work, we only do global work for the global community through the UN and through the Washington office. But again, we are a resource for you. And I want you to think about us. We want to have some expertise on almost any justice issue that's going on, from reproductive justice, issue of Palestine. We have staff that need webinars for and we have staff in New York City, so they can drive out. But we also can do digital world, reverse assessment. So please don't hesitate. Dan has my email, and so I will encourage you to reach out to us. So this is our staff work. On the left, we got Catherine Gordon with the blue scarf on. Catherine does all our international work. So if you really have an interest in what's the church's position on Israel and Palestine, she lived in Israel and Palestine for 2 years. She's very committed to that issue right now. Obviously, a lot of heartbreak with what's going on and all of the killing that's going on with the Palestinian people. And so the church, the Presbyterian Church, has been very aggressive in our criticism of Israel before this war. We were one of the few denominations, I think it was probably over 12, 14 years ago, when we we divested from industries that were supplying the Israeli war machine, Motorola, Caterpillar, HP, and not at the last Durham Seminary, we declared the state of Israel an apartheid state. No other denomination comes close to what we have done. So other denominations look to our leadership for statements. We have really strong policy. Again, affirming Israel's right to exist. We're really bemoaning the way that we are treating the Palestinian people before this war broke out. And it's really heartbreaking what's going on now. And so there's a lot of pain, a lot of hearts over trying to clean this world. And Catherine does all right international books. If you were to send me an email saying I want some information on what the church is doing concerning Israel, Palestine, the Sudan, the Congo, I will refer you to Catherine. Then we have beside her in black, Christina Cosby. Christina does all of our domestic work, plus our environmental justice work. Any bills that are in Congress, Christina keeps up with them. Now, we can only pursue the social witness policy positions of the denomination. So we don't determine the positions, we reflect the positions. So anything that the church has spoken to, we can speak to. In my 9 years in this position, I've only come across one issue that we didn't have policy on, and that was the filibuster. We've never made a mistake with everything else. And my running joke is what the Presbyterian is not spoken to. We have spoken to everything. I mean, you look at our social witness policy statements, it goes back since 1915 is the earliest one I can think about, when we came out against prisons, debtors' prisons. So we have policies that goes back way over 100 years. They're written policy. And again, we have to reflect this. So Christina does all our domestic work and international work. A lot of work the last couple of weeks on, obviously, the budget. A lot of work. I mean, it's just amazing the amount of work that's being done by the different denominations to deal with issues. And we have obviously our priority areas, but we mostly reflect what's happening in D.C. Whatever Congress is talking about, whatever bills are about to be passed or not to be passed, we do a lot of work on the IRA, the Reduction Act. Infrastructure. No, what was IRA? What did that stand for? Reduction Act. This was the
That was the inflation.
Inflation Reduction Act. Thank you very much. And also the Build Back Better. We have a lot of that. Now we do advocacy. We don't do lobbying. Okay. There's not a whole lot of difference between the two. We still need to deal with the Congress, kind of influence them to vote certain ways. Not vote certain ways, but we're not registered as lobbyists. We do engage, especially with Congress, on instant degrees. And so then we also have Ivy with the brown sweater. Ivy does some of our administrative work, but also our young adult leadership work and our events and conferences. We have the little Andrew Peterson. Now, how many of you are familiar with the restructuring that's going on in the church right now? So, we went from Presbyterian Mission Agency on this side, Office of General Assembly on this side. Last year, the students said they had to merge together. So we're right in the heart of that right now. So we're no longer, even though my card says PMA, I'm not supposed to give them out, but I'm going to get rid of 500 cards, so I'm really But Andrew, so the peacemaking office was eliminated. Peacemaking office in the past was part of the UN office, and then it came over to his own office. But Andrew, we changed to Andrew. So Andrew is now part of our staff, so we still are doing work on peacemaking. But instead of the office, it's now part of the office of the witness. And then on the far right, the black one, Sue Green is the UN office. And so their office is right across from the UN. They get you into the UN, they have credentials for the UN, they have access to meetings, things going on. And then Claire Boston is our newest hire about 8 months ago. Claire also is in the UN office as well. So I'm going to go very fast so we can engage with them. I do want to plant this seed with you. We do a lot of work with young adults. A lot of work with young adults. We have a young adult advocacy conference that we do once a year, only for college students and for seminarians. It's a free conference that they can come to. We're charging $15 this year because when it was free, they would sign up and not come. So we're trying to say, well, at least they pay something, so we'll see how that works. But we want to, we really basically it's a free conference. Because they say, I don't have $15 to come anyway. It doesn't matter. It was a regional conference for them to drive to and not have to travel across the country. We were the first one in Louisville, the Seminary, we were the second, and we were the Presbyterian our denomination, we realized that we kind of moved away from young adult leadership development, especially in getting them to know about the work of the church, because many young adults, one, have no idea the work we're doing on the national level. Secondly, they don't think the church is engaged in justice advocacy. And we know that is a passion for young adults. And we have got to get on that bandwagon. I mean, the student protest on the college campuses was phenomenal. The ways that it was spontaneous across the country, protesting against the Israeli-Hamas war, the George Floyd. My daughter and I went to D.C. for a couple of marches. 85% of the people there were with them, thousands of young adults. So they have a passion, and so we've got to connect with them on that area. So we do summer interns. We starting tomorrow, so I've got to rush out today. After this vote, we're going to have 11 interns for an office of 7 people. And it's grown each year. When I first got there, we had 2 to 3. Last couple years, 5 to 6. And now we have 10 applicants plus another one came in. So they want to connect with the work of advocacy. And then we also do with the Young Adult Fellow, Young Adult YAV, Young Adult Volunteer Program. That's a year-long program out of Louisville for young adults that can travel around the country. There's a site in Scotland, about 9 different sites, New York, where they can work with the church for a year. And then we work with seminaries to do field work. UN Commission on Status of Women, has anyone been to CSW? It happens every year in March. It's 2 weeks. Our UN office is sponsored by the UN, but we're one of the partners. We always have a Presbyterian coalition of the individuals who are coming from faith-based organizations. Is always the largest coalition. So we really would encourage you, most people will come down for a week, but it's also online, but we would encourage you to look at the Commission on Status of Women. And then also, that's the Young Adult Conference that I told you about, Jesus and Justice Conference. And those are pictures from last year. Digital advocacy is the way we do most of our work today. Now, people started to come back to DC. After the pandemic, everything obviously was online. And even before the Trump administration came in, in order of federal work back, we're starting to do more work on the ground in DC. This is our second run around with the Trump administration. Benefit to the faith communities that obviously brings us close together. The coalition work that we do is a vast majority of the work we do. We do very little work in isolation. It's with the other denominations that we release sign-on letters, petitions, things along that line. But through digital advocacy, Facebook, obviously, we do a lot. We more hits on Facebook for the stories and the pictures that we put up. We Twitter a little bit when there's an event. Like there's a rally or something. I might tweet, but not a lot. Zoom obviously is the major way we do a lot of our work. And then we have a wonderful web page, and then we do what's called an action alert. And an action alert is not putting it up. Okay. This is what an action alert is. For some reason, it's not.
There you go.
So the action alert, there it is. So the action alert, if you really want to engage with our office, we send out action alerts when something is happening in DC. Asking you to get to a member of Congress to vote for it or against it. Usually it's directed to a member of Congress. All you have to do, if you go on our distribution list, we will send you the statement that always looks like that. It's action on the top. It state the purpose of the alert, what we want you to do, the position we want you to take. And if you feel so moved, you go to the bottom, it says click here, it'll take you directly to a member of Congress. And then you can either send the 3-pair statement that we have, I put it in, or you can write your own action alert. So then we also issue statements. This is one that we wrote in September 2021 about the height of the violence towards Asian Americans that was going on in the country. When COVID first hit, we do webinars all the time. At least once a month. We used to be international and domestic, and now we just kind of do whatever the hot topics are. And related to this, I don't have it up there, but we have what's called Advocacy Hour, the 4th Wednesday of the month. And I know there's a lot of information, so I will give you this PowerPoint if anyone wants to preview it afterwards. in the life of the church. But you know, justice advocacy can provoke controversy in some congregations where people feel you're bringing politics into the church. What about the separation of church and state? So we dealt with that whole issue, how it's really not a violation of church and state, because we have the right to engage with the government. We can't control the government, and the government can't tell you what to believe or what kind of, you don't have state support of churches. But this has been very popular. We had 800 people registered for the first, I think about 400 of them showed up. So we're averaging about 300 people. We're to the fourth one, the last one was on education, one on immigration. That was a real popular one as well. All of these are available on our webpage. And then we also engage with members of Congress as much as possible. You know, Chris Toombs, from Delaware. He's a good Presbyterian elder with the Yale's Theological Seminary. Very engaged with the church. We have right now, this is the 118th Congress and the 117th Congress. There were 24 Presbyterians in Congress, 12 in the House, 12 in the Senate. I think there are only 6 Democrats, so the worst were Republicans. And I'll say this, we don't deal with partisan politics. We don't deal with individuals, we only deal with justice issues. Because you never know, some of you are on one side, and on one issue, you might be on the same side on the next issue. So we always are very intentional. We don't call out people's names. And we cannot take stances against candidates anyway, because that violates the Johnson Amendment. But we're only dealing with issues. And so we do try to engage as much as possible with members of Congress. I will share with you, it's been hard to engage directly with them. Before the pandemic, if you had a meeting with a member of Congress, chances are the member of Congress would be there. Now, it's mostly with the staff. I would say 90% of the meetings are with the staff. But that's legitimate as well. The reality is the staff are all over. The staff come in with pen and paper. The congressman or congresswoman comes in ready to talk. I had a staff member ask me once, well, you know, what do you want me to say? Don't worry about it. He's going to do all the talking anyway, so we don't have to say a whole lot. But we try to engage primarily with Congress. With the White House, we try as much as possible to start to penetrate the White House. The Obama administration was the prime time for the faith group. They really engaged with the faith community. The Trump administration, very little engagement, even with the evangelical community. They talk about evangelicals all the time, but they don't really engage with them as well. They want them to mount support for the Trump administration. With Joe Biden's administration, it was right down the middle. They communicated with us. Anybody here work for the Biden administration? Okay, good. They communicated with us, but talking about what they were doing. They wanted us to share with our constituents what they were doing, but they didn't listen as well as the Obama administration did. We're back to ground zero right now with the Trump administration. Very little engagement. Even though he has set up a person who's over there, he has one person faith-based office, but again, it depends on who you are, whether you actually get the traction. And very quickly, so we engage with the White House out in D.C., we engage with the State Department, with Catherine, our international work, we engage with the White House, and we engage with members of Congress. So these are our websites. Have any of you visited our new webpage for PCUSA? Isn't it horrible? I mean, isn't it just wonderful? Now, this is the new and improved version of our webpage. The first one they said was too cluttered, too much going on. This one now we're going to the other extreme. It's kind of hard to find stuff, but it's pretty. It's a lot prettier. So this is what our web pages look like. On the left, the UN, and on the right, Washington office. But there's a lot more, and you'll see a drop-down screen on the right. Like if you had a young person who's interested in an internship, just have them go to the OPW web page. You'll see internships on the side. So very quickly. Now these are resources for you. These are documents that Presbyterian Church has written over the last 50 years on everything from that red one on the top and the one to the right on voting rights, the one to the left is the very popular one on gun violence. It's called gun violence, gospel values. Below that one, you'll see on climate change. The left one, the issue of immigration. The last one on the second row, the first one goes to nonprofit prisons. Anything you can think of, we have written statements on. So these are resources for your committees. You have a social justice committee. You want to look at the church's position on any given topic. And as a matter of fact, when you go to the webpage, it doesn't look like this is what the covers look like. This is on my iPad, a screenshot. When you go to it, it's on the topics. What are some human rights statements that the church has written? Healthcare, things on that line. But these are really good resources. They have really good ideas and suggestions for things that you can do. We came out of ACS Advisory Committee, so Now, if I don't sign the file newsletters, who gets our newsletters? Someone from this congregation told me they did.
Oh, I get it.
The
I
newsletters?
misunderstood your question, I'm sorry.
You get our newsletters?
Yeah.
Yes. So if you see the top on the left, that's actually the old way it looked, but we have daily news briefings. So if you sign up for those, they will be.
I got it.
That's
Yep.
right. So what are
You put me on the spot, Jimmy.
Think fast.
Put me on the spot.
Yeah.
Well, it's highlights of action statements that PCUSA, and it's usually about 3 or 4 per day.
Yeah, yeah. And so you can read the ones you want to read, especially if you want to keep up with what's going on with unification. They do good articles, keep it up. So anything that primarily the national church is doing. But also you know about the Presbyterian outlook and Presbyterian today, 3 articles about Presbyterian church life. And Unbound is our online social justice periodical. So these are web resources, part of our webpage. One on Israel Palestine, racial justice, and then gun violence on the bottom. And then I put these up because they heal the roll call of free, nonpartisan roll call given by Washington Post. The heal is an entity of itself that as soon as something happens in D.C., there's an article coming. I'm not talking 15, 20 minutes later. They have a really wonderful way of free subscriptions that you can get their newsletters. I really encourage them. I like them both. Some people like roll call over the hill, but they're nonpartisan, so you don't get that partisan flavor where they talk about this is what just happened off the Capitol Hill. And then ecumenical relations. There are 70 nonprofits and church faith-based groups that meet once a month in D.C., the Washington Interreligious Staff Committee. And we have the worst acronyms in D.C. WISC is this one, what it's called. So that's a mouthful. But we do a lot of our work together. Again, a lot of our work is in coalition. A lot of it. When we issue statements all the time, now the advocacy hours within our church, but a lot of our sign-on letters and things going up high. And then we have the other ones called POLO. Don't make your imaginations run away with you now. That stands for Heads of Washington Office. So we meet once a month as well. All the heads of the office talk about ways in which we can do advocacy in D.C. And lastly, we're partnering with the Portland's campaign with Reverend Barber and Israel Harris. And that's my family. That's my wife. And daughter Kayla James and myself. I'm going to leave the pictures up. So, one of the things that this was advertised as was the issues that we are contending with in D.C. and in New York. The biggest issue, again, as I mentioned, is the budget. We really are paying a lot of attention. The House has already passed the budget. It's in the hands of the Senate now. We're waiting to see what's going to come out of that. Not a lot, but we're actively campaigning against this budget because of the cuts to SNAP, to Medicaid, to increase the tax cuts again, primarily benefiting the rich. All of the assessments that we see, even the CBO said that it's going to increase the deficit by what? $2.8 trillion. So it's not going to reduce the deficit at all. So we're actively working against it. That's what everybody's talking about in D.C. right now. What happens in D.C. especially is that while we have our priorities, we have to strike while the iron is hot. So whatever you read about in the paper that's going on in D.C., that's what we're focusing on. Because we have to make sure that we get the voice of the church in accordance with the positions of the church, known in Washington, D.C. Now, the question is how much are they listening to the faith community? Let me know when we have 25. What time is it? 3:27. Let me know when we have 8 minutes. Okay. I'm very precise by the way. They say that this is the voice of the faith community. It's dubious, to be honest with you. I don't know how much they're really listening. It's all about constituency. It's all about constituency. And that's one of the reasons why the evangelical community gets more attention, because they can almost promise votes. They have a lot of sway over their constituency. And you cannot tell a Presbyterian how to vote. It just does not work out that way. And so they don't think that we can, and that's a lot of those who engage in this work, especially in the House, for re-election every 2 years. So that they govern for a year and they're running for re-election. And so it's let the staff know who you are, so you get the audience when it comes. Because they still count votes, they still pay attention to what their constituents say. And if you are trying to set up a meeting, when the first question is going to ask you, are you a constituent? The answer is yes. I am a constituent. Because again, it's so funny. On some of their web pages, when you try to send them an email to their web page, they ask you for your district zip code. And if it doesn't match up, you cannot even send them an email through their web page to find out. But the budgets just caught all of our attention. We're hoping that it will not pass. We're hoping that we can have an influence. We have been working in coalition with the Poor People's Campaign, who is now the Paris of the Bridge. They've been in D.C. for every Monday. They have started reinitiating more Mondays on Monday. So we had our co-moderator, Tony Lawson, which was the last group that went into the Capitol on Monday. We are their staging ground when they come to D.C. oftentimes. They will come up to our office, meet before, all in person. So there are a lot of different ways we're trying to get across. We do rallies and we do sign-on letters, we do direct petition, we do members of Congress. So there's a wide array that we do our work. There's no one that's oftentimes better than the other. Obviously, face-to-face engagement with members of Congress is the most effective. So if you have a member of Congress who's a member of the church that you're familiar with, and you can get someone to connect to you personally, that always helps. And so when we meet, the things, tools that we use, we have a book called Upholding Discontentment. And I can see an electronic version of that. It tells you how to set up a meeting with your member of Congress, what to say on the meeting, and especially how to follow up on the meeting. You want to follow up and you want to be courteous, because you want to leave a positive impact. But it also will work if you want to set up a meeting with state legislators as well, and with your local members of Congress. Members of the city council or the mayor. There's different focuses. Obviously, the national focus, where we want to work with the federal government, advocacy with them. You have the state focus, with the state legislators, your general assembly, and your governor. And then you have your local focus, with the local municipality. You oftentimes can get things done quicker on the local level, because you have access to them. Many of you know members of the city council and your mayor, a lot of them go to church, things along that line. The issue with that is that this region is for your city. Oftentimes you want to make an impact nationally or globally. So that's when you have to go to Congress. But that's the most frustrating part, because it takes such a long time to get anything through Congress. Especially, it's interesting, you have one party ruling both houses in the White House, you still can't see anything done. And so then when you have a divided Congress, that really makes it interesting. I will say we need better individuals, not better, but individuals elected to Congress who are more tuned to God. It's really taken a twist in the agenda of some of the members who have come to Congress. There's stories about one member of Congress campaign against the Affordable Care Act, and once he was elected, the first thing he did was went over to the office and said, I want my health insurance. And they said, well, you got to be sworn in first. They raised a sand, that's a fit. So we got individuals who are not necessarily public servants, as we would like to think about. So I'm putting all that on you. You got to elect better people to Congress. And we really do. There's countries in the state where we're electing individuals, it's a lot of fluff. But, for those of you who've been around a long time, well, it's kind of always been like that, but it's kind of different now. They fight with each other in the party. So right now we're dealing with the budget issues. Immigration, obviously. The Trump administration came in with ICE raids and things along that line. Our denomination signed on to a lawsuit against the Trump administration, wherein they are saying that churches will no longer be considered sacred spots, where they can basically go into church to see they're going into schools. Now there are workplaces and things along that line. But they're saying now that there's no holds barred. There are no places that are off limits. Churches used to be sacred ground, where they would not enter into a church. Now they're saying that they are going to. So we're part of the lawsuit to stop that. And also there are a couple other lawsuits that are going on, trying to stop this administration with some of these more heinous acts, especially separation of families and deporting people kidnapping people off the street, and sending them out of the country. This is not the way that a Christian, we are not a Christian nation. They'll accuse me of being a Christian nationalist, but people who say that they're Christians, and we're really grounded in Christian faith. We've got to re-examine where we are as a nation right now. Okay. So immigration has been a big issue that we've been continuing with. The last couple of years, we were looking at the Farm Bill. The Farm Bill is actually up. This is 2025. Farm Bill is up in 2023. So they have not passed a new Farm Bill. It goes for 10 years. Farm Bill goes for a lot of them with the funding of SNAP and then other benefits for the farmers in this country. We've not made any headway with that. It really has not moved. It comes out of the Agricultural Committee, still sitting in the House. And so it's been very difficult to deal with. All right, so those, I would say, with the last 2 or 3 years, those have been the primary issues. Now again, the Israel war against Israel, Palestine, we've had a lot of actions on that. A lot of statements that we have written. We've done a webinar on it, trying to really raise the consciousness. But right now, no one's making any headway. No nation, the Europeans, the UN has come out with just some wonderful statements and asking for this war to be stopped, calling for a ceasefire. But Netanyahu is not listening to anyone, and there was a lot of disenchantment with the Biden administration and the ways he's handled that entire thing when he was in office. Also, with their actions, non-actions towards Cuba. You know, he took it off to sponsor state terrorism. I think 2 weeks before he left office, and then the first thing Trump did was put it right back on. Foreign policy in the United States needs a lot of attention. And with the UN is a wonderful organization. I really have so much admiration for many of the statements that they issue, but they don't have enforcement power. And with the Security Council, it just takes one veto to stop any actions on the part of the UN. So the UN basically has voice, but not the ability to carry out what they consider to be important. Yes, sir. So I'm going to stop talking. Any questions you have about anything that I've said or about any of the ways we do our work, but especially any of the ways that you want to connect with the office, things that's going on here locally, that you consider to be important, what are some ways that we can resource you? Yes, sir.
How do you measure your progress?
I hate that question. How do we measure our progress? It's difficult. It's difficult because it takes time to move an issue. We measure progress when our goals is attained. You know, for example, with the budget. If we were to get a better budget passed, we would say yes. But it's difficult because everything that we do is over the course of time. And so we've never had a conversation with a member of Congress asking for them to vote against the bill that they were previously supporting. They say, oh, well, I get it now. You know, I'm going to change my vote. But there have been some things, like when the Biden administration took Cuba off of the sponsor state terrorism, we really saw that as a victory for our office. We were one of the leading offices meeting with the State Department. Over the course of the last 2 years, we probably have had between 7 and 8 meetings with the State Department. We also I had a meeting with the Biden's faith-based office when the war against Palestinian people broke out. Myself, I took the initiative on this one. I knew the guy who was on the office, and we had a meeting with members of that faith-based office and talked about ways that this war needs to stop. This was early. The war broke out in October. This meeting was probably in November or December. And a lot of the things that we talked about over the course of that meeting, we asked them to take back to the president. They came into fruition with a lot of discontentment on the part of young people, expressing a lot of dissatisfaction, saying that they were not going to go for the administration. We warned him that that was going to happen. Young people were not going to sit back and become enthusiastic about the Democratic Party when this war is going on, and how horrendous it was, and the casualties that we had to report. I would say another victory that predates me was the forgiveness of African debt relief. Before I came into this office, Lenora giving this time. You know, J. Herbert Nelson was my predecessor, our former state clerk, and his predecessor was Lenora giving this Ivory group. And I saw a picture of her, this was in the 80s when Clinton was president, of her in the Rose Garden with President Clinton signing African debt forgiveness. She was representing this community for the work that we had done, but they gave us a lot of credit for the action. But again, it is very difficult to have a goal to say, even within the course of the year. Now, of course, we lobbied very hard for the IRA bill and very hard for Build Back Better as well, and both of those things we felt some satisfaction. It's always coalition. And it's not just the faith community, but it's the nonprofits. It's the voice of the American people that really they listen to that and how the voters, especially in the industry. Those are the things I would say we have success on. But we do have a lot of, the staff, they probably sit in on 9 to 10 meetings a week, just with different coalition partners. And so it's ongoing advocacy, trying to engage with the federal government. Who else? Anyone else? Yes, sir.
The big beautiful bill.
Mm-hmm. Which one are you talking
The one that, among other things, is going to cut Medicaid benefits and SNAP benefits. I know that my congresswoman will vote the way that I want her to on that. I know that our 2 New Jersey U.S. senators will vote the way that I want them to on that. I also know that those, that 1 vote in the House, 2 in the Senate. I have no influence on the members of Congress who might go either way and represent other districts. Is there any way that you would suggest people like us to effectively sway members of Congress who don't represent us where we are not their constituents?
How do you have influence on members of Congress when you're not in your district? Share that it's not worried about this members of Congress, we're going to vote for the budget, big beautiful bill. I still think, even though they are very concerned with their constituents, they are concerned with the voices of the American. They do listen. And now, before the 117 Congress went out, I was placing a lot of hope in moderate Republicans that they would really kind of stand up and say that, this is part of I don't share that same enthusiasm, but I do think moderate Republicans can hold the key. I tell you who's been surprising me has been Josh Hawley. As horrible as he has been in the past, he's making a little bit of sense right now on this big budget bill. I'm not going to call it big beautiful. But I do think the voices of the American people are still important.
So it's worth our time to pick out some of the members of Congress that might go the way we want them to, even though we're not there.
Even though you're not in your district, and especially, it's interesting the way protests happen and these rallies happen. They're spontaneous. They really are. We try to do as much planning as we can, but they count. When people get word that something's happening here, and all of a sudden they start mobilizing. If there were a series of rallies across the country against this budget bill, they pay attention to stuff like that, even whether it's in their district or not. So we've got to make sure that the American people, because it's amazing, even though we feel this in power, we still have power. We still have power. We determine who is elected, and we also have the ability to speak out on issues. They really want to know how people feel as a whole in the Republic, especially if there's a wide number of them who are speaking out on issues. But it's got to be a lot. It's got to be a lot. 1 or 2 or 3, we're not listening to them. There were a series of rallies in this country this coming Wednesday in almost every major capital against this bill. That would give some of them some courage. And I really think that's what it's needed nowadays. They're so concerned about job security. Some of them, not all. Obviously, we have members of integrity who are in Congress, who are trying to do the best job that they can. But a lot of them are looking at how to keep their job. And so if they feel that the vote is going to vote now, they might respond. But we need political courage today. And I would say on both sides of the aisle. There are things like I wish Democrats had spoken out more and really pushed the Biden administration on more in Israel. I think they really could have done a lot more and hold them accountable for this inaction. And the article came out a couple of weeks ago saying that they
sanctuary, and to have a sanctuary for immigrants. Do you have enough information of how that's going, or are you hopeful?
Yeah, we've been studying it now. Amanda's craft. I will say this, the national staff, almost any area of folks, we have someone who does Amanda Craft, does our immigration advocacy out of Louisville. So Amanda and Christina on our staff have been following. So I think it was probably about 3 weeks ago, the initial hearing was held in Washington, D.C. We attended it, and it's basically laying the groundwork. So right now, they still are before the judge. No type of hearings have been rendered at all. But there's some concern on our side that she may rule against us. Because some of the questions that have been asked have been kind of pointed to leaning towards the government side. But right now, still, we don't know which way it's going to determine. Yes.
I'm doing my best to try to be specific with this question. So, when I call my congressional office, they want to make sure that I'm a part of that district. Otherwise, they don't care.
Right.
So, I wonder to what extent you're able to identify those representatives that have a heavy constituency of Presbyterians, and the extent to which you're able to mobilize those Presbyterians to be influential with that particular representative.
That's almost an impossible ask. You're asking about Presbyterian and how can we mobilize Presbyterians in a certain district. As part of the national staff, we don't have access to a database for Presbyterians representatives. And I think we try to protect people's privacy. So our office does not have access to all the Presbyterians. Now we do have access to obviously Presbyterians and the councils, not so much with the congregation, but there's so many of them. So it's hard to mobilize constituents by faith, because you don't know, like in this area, I've asked questions about how many Presbyterian churches are here. Even with presbyterians, don't necessarily have the means to contact every member of the presbytery. So that's difficult. Now we can issue out a general call and say, for example, in Morristown, we want all the Presbyterians to call their member of Congress, but we really have no way of seeing that goes through, unless, again, we were able to work with the Presbytery very closely on that. So we, as an office, now we have about 6,000 Presbyterians on our database, so we obviously can communicate with them. But as far as having regional impact, but that is, and to be candid with you, it's hard to get that type of response from Presbyterians, to be honest with you. We are still evolving in our engagement with advocacy. I think for me personally, I think it's at an all-time high. We go around the country, talk to Presbyterians, more of them seem to be interested in advocacy and want to talk about it. We know that the civil rights movement, many Presbyterians felt that the church was going too far. Eugene Carson Blake, Martin Luther King got arrested. You got nasty letters from Presbyterians saying, one guy wrote, "You scalawag, I hear you in jail. I hope they keep you in jail." So we are involved. We're no longer there anymore. But I do think, I cannot say that when we issue a call for Presbyterians together, that the response is always to the degree that we would want it to. But again, Presbyterians are becoming more and more involved. And I will point to the advocacy hour. The numbers are growing. The people who are looking for ways to become engaged in their local community. So when we talk about how we mobilize them, and let's be honest, Presbyterians are in different places when it comes to advocacy. Some say we're doing not enough, some say we're doing too much. Most of us right now, we're good moderates as a denomination, But I am very hopeful for where we are. I do think now, and I think this problem is part of the problem with our office being able to do that. As I stated earlier, we only do federal advocacy. We don't really deal with states. We only globally with the international community and that's primarily because of the size of our staff. We just don't have the ability to do all that. And so we don't have a network. Now we've been talking about establishing grassroots to network throughout the country, but it would take full-time staff to do that. So, cut that off. If you want to advocate for our having more staff, the next General Assembly, we would bring the cut back on that.
Your per capita at work.
What other questions or thoughts? Yes.
How does your staff keep up their morale and deal with frustration when you've done so much work and you're working in a certain direction with an issue and then administration changes and the pendulum goes the other way? It must be incredibly frustrating.
Yeah. Well, we have a good staff. We have a very good staff, and I'm blessed and I'm believed to direct these two offices. They're very passionate. They all believe intimately in the work that we're doing. And we also have a healthy culture, work culture. I talk to them about work-life balance, that don't take your work home with you. I tell them, I get home, I put my cell phone down. You send me an email after 5 o'clock. I sometimes will check later on at night, see if anything emergency came up. But I talk to them about not being consumed by work, because you're absolutely right. It can be so frustrating. And sometimes it's more painful than other times. Again, this war between Israel and the Palestinian people, I think has sapped a lot of strength and energy from the staff, especially Catherine. She's really hurt because of what's happening there. But we really try to be attentive to people's energy levels and to make sure that people feel appreciated. I tell them take all your vacation time, because the year's over, it's gone, you can't get it back. So we try to make sure we have a healthy work culture. But I will say again, because they are so passionate, all of our staff, or the 7 that we have, all of them have MBAs except for one. Claire's the only one who does not have an MBA. So all of them are girded in Reformed theology. And they have that fun out, and it makes a difference. It's not mandated for us to hire someone, but it's important for me to look for individuals who have an MBA, because they not just understand public policy, they understand the relationship between the church and public policy, and that ultimately our hope is in God, and that God will make a difference. And so, trying to really keep an eye on them, and when they say they're tired and need half day off, no problem, you do what you need to do. And we also are in a very positive ecumenical and interfaith environment in DC. It is so, everyone works so well together. I've never been, I don't know what it's like in Morristown, but when I was in North Carolina trying to get pastors together, it's like herding cats. It was very difficult to get all of us to come when we weren't at the head of the table, especially after that third or fourth meeting. But in DC, it's just the opposite. We have to really say, okay, look, I can't join in on this one right now. I've got so much else going on. But there's a lot of support in DC. In working groups, there are people of like-mindedness. And I will say also, there's a youthful component to the ecumenical environment. A lot of the offices have had turnovers and brought in a lot of young people. And they bring a vitality that I think is really needed. So, yes.
This question might be outside of your expertise, but PCUSA, do they have any opinion or, I don't know what the word is, about the Christian nationals?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
We have some very negative opinions about Christian nationalism. We have a paper. Yeah, we have a paper that's coming out at the next General Assembly on Christian nationalism that was approved. Now, I will say this, as far as our national stance, we're behind. This paper should have came out a couple of years ago. But we have AC Swap writing a paper right now. They were in our office about 3 weeks ago we were advising them some of the things to look out for. But I'm going to be candid with you. If you want to know who to go to for information on Christian nationalism, go to the Baptists. The Joint Baptist Committee for Religious Freedom, which is their offices in DC, they are the experts on Christian nationalism. They have been working on this for the last 6-7 years. They have a web page devoted to Christian nationalism. And I know Amanda Tyler personally. I've been on the webinar with her talking about Christian nationalism. She knows what she's talking about. So her new book is called How to End Christian Nationalism. And what her book is different from the others, and that the others are more of a historical record, like you're familiar with Jesus and John Wayne. But they give you an idea of how Christian nationalism has grown within the evangelical ranks. Her book talks about individual congregations, how individual congregations can combat Christian nationalism. So we are catching up, but and I will say that we have worked in coalition with them, but they really are the ones that you want to look to for Christian nationalism expertise. And I would say Amanda goes around the country. She's on CNN talking about Christian nationalism. She's on a book tour right now, but she's accessible. So if anyone wants to connect with Amanda, I can connect you with Amanda because I think she will be open to doing a webinar or something along that line with your congregation or with your presbytery. How much time do we have left?
It's 5 to 4.
Okay. I apologize. I've got to end right at 4 because I've got to catch a train back to, where am I going? Baltimore. Going home. But any other thoughts, any other questions? Anyone has?
Well, thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you.
I'm grateful that you are in your position and you have passion for it. I understand it must be frustrating because you're running into all sorts of walls, but you keep at it, so thank you for that.
Thank you. And I will say this is a good time to be a Presbyterian. It really is. I do think the church, especially, there's always been this disconnect between the national church and local congregations. You know, I pastored for 25 years. We were always talking about Bloom, what they doing in Bloom. You know, they had a disconnect with the local congregations. But I think we're starting to come more together now. Especially ever since, you know, a lot of our congregations left, some of our more conservative congregations left. But they also took a culture with them that we no longer have to continue with anymore. It's just not as contentious as it used to be, especially General Assembly. General Assembly used to be interesting. You know, you might have a fight break out before General Assembly at any time. But the last couple of ones, really, it's a different format, but I think we're more in line with one another. Disproportionate number of the overtures that come from the presbyteries to the committees are dealing with social justice. And when you look at those social justice overtures, a disproportionate number of them come towards the Washington office and the UN office. These are coming from Presbyterians. And this is what the Presbyterians are interested in. So I'm really pleased that our church is moving in the direction that it's moving. We've got some serious issues to contend with. There are a couple of things, I didn't mention this, but a lot of congregations are looking at affordable housing issues. We have more property than we can deal with. And a lot of congregations are looking at ways, how can they utilize their property? Like in Washington, D.C., Westminster Church, they had acres of land here, the church was right in the middle, so they had an agreement with the city of Washington, D.C. that's going to tear down this building, build them a new building on this side of the property, and build affordable housing on this side of the property. We have the Office of Innovation that is looking at ways that, tell them I'm not a joke right now. I had it happen doing a sermon one time, I said, that better be Jesus. But we have the Office of Innovation and the Office of Repair. The Office of Repair deals with reparations, the Office of Innovation is dealing with affordable housing, and they're cataloging not all of us, we just take find out about churches that are engaging in affordable housing. There are a lot of things happening in our denomination now. The other part is that we're down to 1.3 million members. A lot of our members are disproportionately seniors. We're trying to find ways we can engage more with young people in the life of the church. But the 1,001 congregations, they're small congregations that we're developing, but they're very creative. They are very creative. They're doing some fun things like the one in Orlando has worship on the beach. Now that's my kind of church. You know, and one Sunday out of the month they do some type of service party. So a lot of creative things are happening. I do think we've got to be very intentional about getting the word out. The Presbyterians know the direction we're headed in, our vision for the church. We have our first Korean American state clerk, Reverend J. O. Dr. Jerry Nelson was our first African American state clerk. Before her, a disproportionate number of our national staff are people of color, Asians, African Americans, not as many Native Americans, but we have Hispanics. When you look at our staff, it's a very diverse national staff. And I will say, other denominations are following in the same vein. Disciples of Christ have an African American woman as their head of the denomination. Obviously, Bishop Kelly has had Bishop Carey before this term was up. So the Spirit is moving through the church right now. A spirit of caring, a spirit of justice, a spirit where in the church is examining its history and looking at what we should have done differently, but also looking ahead and saying, what do we need to do now? What direction is the Spirit of God moving us in? How is God calling us to take advantage of the resources we still have, again, especially property and money? We got a little bit of money in this church still. There are churches with endowments, more money than they spend. But the church, I think, is open to what God is doing. And God is doing a new thing today. So thanks be to God, and thanks for all of you who do. Last night, I was very impressed with your webpage, especially the page with the ministries on it, all the connections that you have. And one thing that I like was not just charity efforts, but several of the organizations who are part of what we do with advocacy. And that's what it's going to take, that partnership. Understand that we have to do charity, but we also have to be engaged in advocacy because we're called to be that ring. We're called to be that ring. And it's very biblical, and God will move in our midst as long as we stay faithful to God.
I think the small SUV will make its way to Metro Park in about 15 minutes. In the meantime, there are bottles of water, there are cookies in the back. Maybe we can just visit with one another before we head out. It is clear that you are not just an advocate, but you are a pastor at heart, and we're grateful for the work you're doing, and we want to support you in any ways that we can. So thank you for being here, and all of you, thank you for being here this afternoon. It's great to be with you again. And anything you want to add, Jean, or anyone else before we go?
No, thank you.
All right, great. Well, let's one thing I will say about my friend Jimmie Hawkins, he loves to take pictures. So
It didn't happen if I don't have a picture of it.
Really, there's some snacks in the back. There are bottles of water. Help yourself and hang out for a few and have a great Pentecost Sunday the rest of the day. Thanks, friends.